Hello, welcome to the GEOVISTA. I'm your host, Jina. With North Korean troops now confirmed to be deployed in Russia, global concerns and warnings are mounting. North Korea and Russia are moving beyond a strategic alliance, evolving into what many are calling a blood alliance. The world is watching closely, anticipating the impact on the Korean Peninsula and international relations. Today on the GEOVISTA, we'll dive into the new phase of the Ukraine war and examine the tightening North Korea-Russia partnership. Join me, Jina, as we break down these crucial developments. The international community is closely monitoring developments in Kursk, located in southwestern Russia. In August, Ukraine forces captured parts of this border region and have been engaged in ongoing clashes with Russian troops. Recent reports indicate that North Korean soldiers have assembled in this area. South Korea's National Intelligence Service has reported that approximately 3,000 North Korean troops are moving toward this Kursk front. The NIS anticipates that North Korea will deploy a total of 10,900 soldiers to Russia and suggests that their active engagement in combat operation is imminent. Some sources even claim that North Korean soldiers have already crossed into Ukraine territory. Despite widespread international condemnation, North Korea and Russia continue their cooperation, maintaining an ambiguous stance on this issue. Where does this strong bond between the two nations stem from? To understand this relationship between North Korea and Russia, we need to look back at the era of North Korea-Soviet ties. Following World War II, Stalin occupied northern Korea and gave full support to Kim Il-sung, a former Soviet army captain, in establishing his regime. Additionally, the Soviet Union deployed its elite military advisory corps that had fought in World War II and discreetly provided military support, including fighter jets, heavily influencing the outbreak and armistice of the Korean War. However, things changed dramatically in the late 1980s. The Soviet Union not only participated in the 1988 Seoul Olympic, but also suddenly normalized relations with South Korea in 1990. After the Soviet collapse, Russia, as its successor, went on to abolish a 1961 military pact with North Korea in 1995. Although North Korea and Russia sought to revive relations in the 2000s, these efforts remained largely symbolic. After North Korea's first nuclear test in 2006, Russia, alongside China, supported UN Security Council Resolution 1718, which meant joining sanctions against North Korea. However, a turning point in North Korea-Russia relations came in February 2022, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Following the outbreak of war, Russia, which was isolated by Western sanctions, sought military and economic alliances, while North Korea viewed Russia as a key partner to escape from its own international isolation. Their strategic interests aligned perfectly. The close ties between the two countries deepened further in September 2023 with Chairman Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia. During this visit, President Putin met with Kim at the Vostochny Cosmodrome, marking the first North Korea-Russia summit in 4 years and 5 months. Putin expressed a willingness to support North Korea's advancements in satellite and other high-tech fields, while also signaling military cooperation. Then, in June this year, President Putin made his first visit to North Korea in 24 years and signed a treaty on comprehensive strategic partnership. This treaty suggests that North Korea-Russia relations had evolved from mere friendship to a substantive military alliance. Article 4 of the treaty specifies that if one party is attacked by another country or a group of countries and enters a state of war, The other party shall provide military and other forms of support by all means necessary. This recent development has put the treaty into action. During the recent BRICS summit in Russia, President Putin did not deny the deployment and pointed out that the North Korea-Russia treaty includes a clause that mandates military assistance in times of war.
Там есть статья 4. И что и как мы будем делать, это уже наше дело.
However, despite the existence of the treaty, these actions by both countries are likely to stir controversy. Article 103 of the United Nations Charter stipulates that in the event of a conflict between a member's obligations under the Charter and its obligations under another international agreement, the Charter obligations shall take precedence. The treaty between North Korea and Russia signed this year states that support will be provided in accordance with the UN Charter and the domestic laws of each country. The UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea comprehensively prohibit military cooperation with the North. In particular, these sanctions ban the provision of training aimed at enhancing North Korea's military capabilities, meaning that training North Korean troops would constitute a violation of the resolution. The problem is that Article 51 of the UN Charter stipulates that collective self-defense is permissible in response to an armed attack on the territory of a sovereign state, which means they could use this as a justification for providing troops. Furthermore, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council with veto power, Russia is unlikely to be punished through Security Council resolutions for these violations. Given the situation, there is a country that comes to mind as a potential stabilizing force: China. Currently, many nations, the US among them, are hoping that China will assume a stabilizing role as it is North Korea's largest training partner and long-standing ally. Unfortunately, there is considerable skepticism about whether China will exert any influence over North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. NATO member countries also believe that while China publicly maintains a neutral stance on the Ukraine war, it is providing support to Russia behind the scenes and therefore is unlikely to intervene in the issue of North Korean troop deployment. There are questions about how effective China's influence will be as North Korea and Russia grow increasingly close. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between North Korea and China. However, there are subtle signs of tension between the two countries. One notable example is that China removed a footprint tribute symbolizing the friendship between Chairman Kim Jong-un and President Xi Jinping. Additionally, North Korea has not displayed a single photo of Xi Jinping at its embassy in China. China is also maintaining a very cautious distance in its relationship with Russia. Although the leaders of the two countries have met 3 times this year, China is very much wary of becoming entangled in a North Korea-China-Russia triangular alliance. For China, the relationship with Russia is one of limited cooperation, while relations with the US and the EU are much more significant. In particular, in terms of technological and economic cooperation, as well as securing the stability of global supply chains, China must be mindful of its reputation and international standing. So far, China has remained silent on the issue of North Korean troop deployment. Given that this situation has emerged as an important variable in international security and the dynamics of Northeast Asia, it is crucial to closely monitor the North Korea-Russia relationship, now more than ever. Yes, we've just explored the timeline of North Korea-Russia cooperation and the history of subtle tensions among North Korea, China, and Russia. Few understand North Korea's military objectives better than our next guest. Joining us to delve deeper into the topic is Army Lieutenant General and former Special Warfare Command General Chun Inbum. Welcome, General.
Thank you for the invitation.
So the main question is, who are they actually, how they were selected, and what missions they were given? Some intelligence tells us that these are from the 11th Corps or Storm Corps, but we don't know about who they are. So how do you assess these troops?
So far, the information that we have indicate that they are from the 11th Corps, which is known by its nickname as the Storm Corps. These units, their main mission is to infiltrate into enemy territory by land, sea, or air, and strike at weak targets such as command and control, logistics, fires, and so forth, and to disrupt the operations of their foe. So these units, they're specialized in that. They can be categorized as either special forces, or light infantry. It's all different. But in this case, it seems by all indications that these troops are predominantly light infantry soldiers who are being deployed to the front in Russia and Ukraine.
Okay, so they're prepared for combat war. But it is true that Russia is facing repercussion and harsh criticism from the international community. Then this leads to the next question. Is Russia in such a dire situation to invite North Korean troops to their territory?
Yes.
How do you assess the current state of the war?
So, wars of will. And right now, 2025 is a critical period in the battles between the Russians and the Ukrainians. The criticality is because we will have a new US president, and in 2022, Putin mobilized about 300,000 soldiers. Right now, the casualty is more than 1,000 Russians every day. So the offensive operations in the Donetsk area seems like it's a success, but the Russians are paying a very high price. Next year, in the summer, Putin will be in a position where he must mobilize again. This time, the numbers could run to 600,000 to 900,000 men. This will cause a significant popularity problem within Russia. Right now, the Russians are recruiting 25,000 to 30,000 men a month, and they're sending them right to the front, which means they're not being trained well. So if you look at the quality of the soldiers that are now being deployed in the front, the 8,000 or 10,000 or even 3,000 North Korean soldiers who are probably well trained in the basics are going to be a good boost for the operations. Something added to that is that indications are that they're going to go into the Kursk area, and we'll have to see whether they'll be fighting a defensive operation or they'll be used as offensive troops.
Okay, that explains why Russia is showing a risk-expectant behavior these days. We also are hearing news from many sources that the North Korean troops being deployed are provided with Russian uniform and Russian equipment. But if that is true, then it means that they are not prepared well beforehand. So do you think that situation can have an impact on their warfighting capability? How do you assess the effectiveness of these troops?
You know, I don't agree with that assessment, because if the North Koreans were to be deployed as PLA, People's Liberation Army soldiers, that means the North Koreans would be at war with the Ukrainians. So instead of doing that, these North Koreans are incorporating themselves into the Russian military. So they'll be de facto fighting as combatants for the Russian military. And of course, they'll be supplied with Russian weapons. Recent reports say they're getting all the small arms that the Russians use, and oh, by the way, that's what the North Koreans use. So it will not be new equipment that these soldiers are unfamiliar with. These are weapons that they're very familiar with. And so it is not an indicator that these men are ill-trained. Rather, it's the opposite. It's the opposite, that among all the reinforcements that Putin has been receiving for the past year, these North Koreans are probably the best trained and best equipped that is available to him.
Yeah, that is true. Let me tell you about the scale of this military assistance to Russia. Well, the National Intelligence Service reported that there will be 10,000 North Korean troops to be deployed by the end of December. How do you see this number? Do you think this can be a game changer or something else?
It's really hard to say because we don't know what the mission and role of the North Korean soldiers deployed to, we think, the Kursk area will be. Right now, the Russians are having an offensive in the Donetsk area, and in the Kursk area, it's mainly been a defensive operation. Will the North Koreans be deployed to maintain the defensive posture, or will the North Koreans be used to try to envelop the Ukrainians in Kursk to regain Kursk? That's an offensive operation. So we don't know that, and we'll have to see. Now, whether these North Koreans will be a game changer or not, that at the tactical level, that depends on how they perform. Nobody really knows. If they perform well, it's bad news for us. But right now what's happening is, because North Korea is involved in this conflict, the parameters or the scale of the war has just widened even to our neighborhood.
Okay. It's also been reported that these North Korean troops are in their late teens and early 20s. That means these are very young soldiers vulnerable to warfare. So it is also speculated that they can surrender or suffer from large-scale casualties. But these are young generation of the North Korean society. Do you think this situation can be detrimental to the North Korean regime in the long run?
Yes, so I don't think age has anything to do with it.
Okay.
In fact, whether you're young or old, it depends upon the person. My friends in the Ukraine military tell me that they're going to target the North Koreans, and I ask them to capture them and to be kind to them, because that's how you would be able to convince the North Koreans that we're not monsters. But anyway, that's just the natural process. The North Koreans are heavily indoctrinated. They are well motivated. Now, if they are killed, the Russians have a bad habit of not taking back their dead. There are hundreds of thousands of Russian dead bodies now refrigerated in Ukrainian facilities. So that's the reality. So if they're not taking back Russian bodies, probably the North Korean bodies will be left there as well. As for the wounded, the North Koreans have a long history of treating their wounded as war heroes. So although there's popular rumors that there's discontent within North Korean society, that could be very true, but whether this is going to be a destabilizing factor or not, we'll have to see how they are treated. I don't think Kim Jong-un is that foolish to send troops that he knows will be maimed and killed that might destabilize his society. I'm sure that he has somehow thought through this and made the decision to send his troops there.
But there may be some reasons why North Korea is making such a bold move. There can be some risks involved, and North Korea might be aware of that. But at the same time, North Korea is expecting something from Russia. What kind of benefits do you think North Korea can gain from this military support to Russia?
So it's bad enough that a dictatorship like North Korea is going to get food, fuel, and money.
Of course.
But now we're all concerned that they're going to get nuclear technology. But that's just half of it. The Russians have established a great electronic warfare capability through this experience with the Ukrainians, that kind of technology. The first-hand combat experience that the North Korean soldiers will be gaining, that's something that you can't buy. So all of this, not to mention the employment and deployment of drones, which is now the future of combat, these things are going to be very worrisome for us. And for the North Koreans, when somebody asks me that questions, I tell them they're going to get everything. I'm very concerned.
Yes, of course, there can be some implications for South Korea as well. And that means that we have to watch closely the dynamics happening on the ground, and we also should emphasize the united cooperation among the like-minded countries in the international society. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing your insights and expertise.
Thank you for the invitation.
Before wrapping up today's episode of the GeoVista, let's take a look at the major events that have occurred around the world over the past week through some images. North Korea's Foreign Minister Choe, the chief diplomat, has returned to Russia after about a month. Meanwhile, the foreign and defense ministers of South Korea and the United States met in Washington, D.C. to discuss issues concerning the Korean Peninsula. This highlights the strengthening ties between North Korea and Russia, while the atmosphere between South Korea and the U.S. remains very tense. There are growing concerns about South Korea's changing role in supporting Ukraine in response to North Korea's military assistance to Russia. Such discussions between South Korea and the U.S. have become a very sensitive diplomatic issue. This is a press conference regarding North Korea's launch of a ballistic missile into the East Sea. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held a National Security Council on October 31st, which was followed by this briefing. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party is already facing internal challenges after failing to secure a majority in the House of Representatives in the recent elections. And now it is confronted with the external challenge of North Korea's new ICBM launch. While strongly condemning North Korea, the Prime Minister also emphasized the importance of dialogue, indicating a preference for prioritizing regional crisis management. Cars are scattered everywhere, broken and shattered. This is the aftermath of heavy rain in southeastern Spain. Many lives have been lost due to the natural disaster. It starkly illustrates the increasing global challenges posed by climate change. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has promised complete recovery, and we hope for the swift restoration of the affected communities. The Los Angeles Dodgers have climbed to the top of the World Series in Major League Baseball. Fans poured into the streets to celebrate the victory. However, as the festive atmosphere escalated, incidents of looting and destruction followed. This win has united fans across the United States and reignited the historic rivalry. Despite injuries to key players like Shohei Ohtani, the residents of LA celebrated passionately. But the complete destruction of the city bus seems like an overly aggressive way to celebrate. This week, I can't wait to see what incredible events await us. With the world eagerly watching, the US presidential election is just around the corner, in which a new leader will be elected. Join us next week on the GeoVista as we dive deep into the election results and explore their implications. You won't want to miss it. This has been Jina Kim. Thank you for turning into the GeoVista.